All right, so here is part two of my explorations of NotebookLM. On the first part, I went through some sources and I clicked on one of the themes that it identified in the source and it generated a sort of an outline essay. We looked at its citations. We then also looked at the medieval warfare and Stauffer era governance mind map, which is quite interesting. I want to fool around today with some other stuff over on the side here. So, deep dive conversation, study guide, briefing doc. Um, let's just see what they do. I don't know what this does, so let's see what it does. Let's click on timeline first. A new note generating based on 27 sources. That would be the sources that I have uploaded into NotebookLM. So this is interesting because, and I'm thinking about this not only for my own work, but also potentially for how students might use this. It's restricting itself to only what is in what you provided. So that can be kind of useful, I think. Especially if you're just starting out. I'm still puzzling over how you build a kind of critical thinking apparatus without first grounding yourself non-digitally in a lot of the sources, because you know you try to explain to students, well, how do you know that the stuff you're getting off of Google is correct, is accurate, is reliable? Not necessarily correct, but at least it comes from a source in which it's sort of, the usual things: peer reviewed, it's been thought through, it's properly set up in terms of its argumentative structure. There's things you could teach for Google. There's things that you could teach students if they're simply Googling things. A checklist of how to identify things that are more likely to be reliable versus things that are less likely to be reliable. The problem, I think, is, obviously, I think a lot of people would agree with this, that it's a bit of a different ballgame when you're dealing with these LLMs, because the source material that it uses, even in this, is less transparent. Just because they're throwing footnotes in here doesn't necessarily mean that you have a quick way of evaluating whether it's a reliable statement. And it's not that bad. I mean, I'm not criticizing a notebook necessarily here, but we're talking about limitations and thinking about how you would teach that to students who don't have the beginnings of your level of expertise. You think about how you gain a kind of expertise in just about any subject. You have to spend long hours with it. You have to absorb a lot of material, and you have to think through that material. Simply having an LLM give you the summary of 27 sources, I mean, it can be useful if you, depending on what sort of thing you're pumping out, I suppose. But it's not. I don't think it's particularly durable. I think there's a lot of folks who would agree with me on that. So I'm still wrapping my mind around how you would use this perhaps to help students navigate the complexity and the vastness of the material that is out there on basically any given historical subject, and then begin to organize it and translate it into their own thoughts with their own words. But you still have that fundamental issue of knowing whether something is reliable or not, and having the tools to figure out whether something is reliable, or whether the citation actually makes sense when you go to check it. And the only way that you do that, as far as I know, is this kind of long, hard slog of study. So I'm not there. I'm not sold on this. I'm sold on it as a tool, perhaps, but it's a tool that raises as many problems as it solves. All right, let's see. Medieval German power, timeline, and key figures. Let's see what it gave us. Okay, let's make this a bit bigger, and I'll move this over here because we don't need that. Detailed timeline, decentralized power in Europe. The concept of the state, as we understand it, did not exist, with the raised public being used for public interest, but even this was often alienated to the church. Suppose broadly speaking, I mean, year 1000 stuff. Emergence of the communes. Yep. Early German Empire. Loose confederation of provinces. Authority was not centralized, often exercised locally. Yes and no. I mean, I think David Bacharach's work has been pretty important in this regard. I mean, his calculations, which are solid, that's solid, very solid work. His calculations of the size of the Ottonian fisc, of the sort of total number of farms and sort of nodes of production that the Ottonians controlled. I mean, it's vast compared to any particular duke. Loose confederation of, I suppose, depends on how you would characterize that. The ministeriales, well, that's a quick way to summarize a very, very contentious Sozialgeschichte question. All right, 10th century, okay. Mm-hmm. No, not bad. That's not exactly accurate in terms of the very long 11th century. Significantly not particular. Yeah. I mean, granted, the investiture controversy is very difficult to present accurately. I'm not sure I ever have quite managed that feat. It's also absolutely impossible to make students interested in it at all. I suppose, I imagine some British colleagues have probably had some success in that regard, but so there's this thing, it was called investiture, and students' eyes begin to glaze over immediately. Let's see. Yeah, the indicatum. Okay. Make this a little bigger. Okay, interesting. 12th century, Servians, Cliens, Minister, as well as Miles Servus Ministeriales. Yes. This is something Benjamin Barber's German knighthood established pretty well, and there's a lot of others that have done this as well. Like, this is why it's so complicated, because they use all kinds of terms, and they know what I forget who put it this way, but they know what they meant by those terms. We are semi-guessing at what they meant by those terms. Sometimes we figured it out. Other times, could be synonyms with a difference, could be something totally different. And then that has implications for how you interpret the society as a whole. Okay, a lot of stuff on there. Okay, that's incorrect. That would be Frederick's father. This was not Frederick Barbarossa. This would be Frederick Barbarossa's father. So his father, possessions acquired by the family in 1106. I'd have to double check that, because I was just working on this part of my book. He's actually Conrad's the younger brother. Frederick was sort of the leader of the family up to about around the election of Lothar. Bamberg, okay, all right, a lot of stuff here. I'd have to check that. I don't know about that. Okay, yep. Kinda. Maybe. I'm actually more part. This is kind of, well, this is interesting because if this is the LLM's conclusion based on all these sources, that's an older kind of interpretation. The tendency these days is to see him as it all is. He's a compromise candidate. He's weak. He governs through consensus and cooperation, and his authority is pretty limited, and he doesn't really have much of a plan. And if we can see that there is something of a plan, it's not really going to be his because we don't really have his voice. Now, I don't really buy about half of what I just said, but that's the tendency of the historiography these days. So that's interesting. That's an interesting the way it's choosing to summarize this. Okay. Yep. Okay. Nah, it's a mistake. Should be 1167. That should be 10 years later. Yeah, that's a mistake. Okay, well, so there's a mix of stuff here. A lot of interesting things. Some of them would be correct. Some of them, again, you would have to know some of it. You'd also have to know where to go back to find this stuff. And then how far does this go? Cast of characters. Okay, let's go convert to source. Let's see what this does. It's right down here. Can we convert this to source? What do we got here? Why did it just go up? The timeline went up by 2. Oh, I see. Okay, interesting. All right, so that's the note in Studio. Let's see what a study guide. Let's click study guide and see what that does. If that does anything. Okay. Can we not do that? Oh. Sorry. Haha. It's... Okay, it's doing that. It's generating. Study Guide 1, Introduction to Key Concepts. Let's take a look what this does. Okay. Short answer quiz. Answer each question 2-3 sentences. Okay. And it gives you answers. Local power management rather than exercising strong centralized power. Strong local figures, fortify their residences, collected tax. Yeah, more or less. More or less. For the emergence of comedy. Mistaken control. Well, I mean, it wasn't mistaken until it was. System failed, increasingly unable to govern effectively, newer figures, Landfrieden, Ministeriales. Patronos favored. It's number 7. The story of Salim and the Frankish knight. Describe the military role of castles in the context of Hohenstaufen rule in Alsace. That is quite specific. That would actually make a good graduate seminar question, actually. Like, not that anyone's ever going to teach, or I will ever get to teach, a graduate seminar on on the political economy of Hohenstaufen rule. Political economy and constitutionalism in 12th century Germany. Yeah, that's never going to happen. But that would be a good question. That would be a very good question if it was. Honor crimes, King Johann of Bohemia, dressed Battle of Muhldorf, interesting. Glossary of key terms. I'm impressed. I'm very impressed. Let's go back to Studio. Study guide. Frequently asked questions. This would be our frequently asked questions. The only thing I'm not seeing here is that it doesn't seem to tie back to It doesn't seem to also give references to this. And that's an issue. That's an issue for me as an instructor, I would think, because I would want to have at least a key to where you would find that specific information. Now, looking through a bunch of these, I can guess where it's drawing information from because I know what's in, well, the vast majority of these PDFs. A lot of it's coming from Barber. A certain amount of it's coming from Rittertum und Höfische Kultur, der Stauferzeit. Laudenschenk's Origins of the German Principalities. A lot of this is coming from just like 4 or 5 sources. But that's interesting. That's interesting. What else here? A briefing document. What is that? Generating based on 30 sources. We'll see now. Oh, I see. So if you want it to generate something and you don't want it to include, say, this right here, which you already generated. All right, can I do anything with this? Oh, I see. Okay. So what we'll do is we'll wait for that to generate and then we'll delete it. Okay, let's delete note. And we'll uncheck that. And we'll uncheck these. So it should be back down to... Okay. All right, let's go back to briefing doc. And let's see what it gives us. Because you don't want to include the summaries, right? Because then you're going to start having problems because any issues in the summaries are obviously going to get washed into your briefing doc. Interesting. It's very interesting. Very interesting. I could see this as a good way if you are providing a tranche of sources to students, which is sort of how I've been reorganizing. I've reorganized all my courses, or I did this for a couple years, and I'm sort of coming back to that in some ways. If you're giving them a tranche of documents, maybe this would be a good way to get students to get used to handling that volume of information. That's something that I think there is some promise with in AI, as long as you look at it very skeptically and critically, and you're able to, especially with these timelines and these overviews, go back and make sure what you're being presented is accurate. Like the whole 1157 thing with Barbarossa, no, that's 1167, so somehow it transposed the 6 and the 5. That's a pretty major mistake. Barbarossa wasn't even in Italy in 57. He goes back in 58. He spends the entirety of 57 in almost the entirety of 57 in Germany and Burgundy and Alsace. All right, well, let's see. What is this briefing document? Providing sources, on the provided sources, focusing on main themes, most important ideas, or facts. Pre-Barbarossa, local lords, delegation of bishops. Okay, it's giving you rough citations in here. Stauffer attempts at imperial restoration. Arnold, a lot of Arnold. Meister, which one's Meister? Interesting, I would have to find that one. The Constitution of Swabia. Yeah, well, that's interesting. Yeah, there's a lot to say about that. Strategic marriages. Okay, Laudiga. Laudiga, concept of Vigo Justitiae. Rise of territorial lordships. A lot of Arnold. It's really going with Benjamin Arnold's work. Now, I like Benjamin Arnold. I know there's folks who criticize him. I actually like his work quite a bit. I think he gets a lot right, and I think that trilogy or quartet, if you include the Counts of Bishop of Eichstätt book, I think that's quite an achievement. Role and status of ministeriales. Okay. Knights and chivalry. Chivalric ideals. I'd have to double check some of these citations. Okay, that's interesting. Interesting. Probably, it must have translated it. But now I'd have to track that down. Warfare and its depiction. Okay, I'd have to go into these edited volumes to make sure that the citations are correct. Oh, wait a minute. I know. It's Barbaros, where is it? Where is it over here? This one. This is Alessandro Barbaros' short thing on Legnano. Barbaros, interesting guy. He's an expert on the Battle of Legnano. His main focus tends to be on other stuff, but he's a historian. Most of his work's on other areas, but he's studied this battle very closely. Okay, so this is interesting. Let's convert that to a source just so it stays. We don't want that lost. Okay, so a deep dive. I don't know. Last thing we're going to do. Let's try this. Let's just try generate and see what it does. May take a few minutes. No need to stick around. Well, okay. Then maybe we'll come back and do this another day. Anyway, a lot to think about here. I'm going to think about somehow incorporating this into the surveys. I'm also curious as to how many students actually know that they could have access to this, how many are using it, how many have a Google account, because if you tell people, oh, hey, you're going to go do this thing on Google, NotebookLM, they're like, well, I don't have a Google account. It's like, well, you got to get one. I've had students say that with, say, YouTube. I signed a video, and it's age restricted because, it's talking about the Namibian genocide or something like that. And they say, well, I don't have an account. It's like, well, you got to get one. So I think part one is making sure everybody has access to the same resources and access to the same set of tools. Obviously, there's been a lot of discussion of this in AI, as in higher ed topics more broadly, to make sure everyone has access to the same things. But if we can get everybody on the same platform, this may have some potential for helping students start to move through a large body of sources. And begin to look at what they're given, tie it back to the sources, but also have a set body of things that they can refer to to double check the AI. Hopefully, in the process, they'll develop some expertise on the subject. That part I'm still not really convinced on. But this has potential. We'll come back to a part 3. We'll see what this audio overview conversation is about later.